Now we are going to talk about FinTech, but before that, kind of an introduction to all our panelists. So first of all, we have Tytus. So Tytus is actually some kind of special entrepreneur with an early stage VC fund, and he's also an ecosystem builder. We have David Rosa, that is actually providing an alternative to opening bank accounts in Hong Kong, which is one of the things that is not working here, obviously. And then we have Alex Medana, co-founder of FinFabrik, using blockchain to reinvent capital markets. So thank you very much, everybody. So Alex, maybe you can first tell us a little bit more about FinFabrik.
2 minutes, yes. So we do 3 things: trading, market making, and issuance of digital assets. We're 28 months old. We are 22, and we're hiring a lot of developers, only developers. So if you speak blockchain, Golang, Solidity, Java, Corda, talk to me.
Thank you, David Rosa. Do you want to say one word about Neat as well?
Actually, a few words. We have a business current account. That's what we have. In other words, you can open remotely an account. It's all online, 10 to 15 minutes experience. And then you get a dedicated account number where your business can receive payments. You can make bank transfers. You get a MasterCard to make payments online or offline. Even get cash from ATMs. And a lot of other features that we'll talk about later on.
And Tytus, we know there are a lot of entrepreneurs here in the room, so I'm sure they would like to know more about Fresco Capital.
Sure, so just briefly, yes, as a VC, of course, we invest in startups and FinTech, some other areas as well. Also, we work with strategic partners, so happy to have those discussions. And then finally, last week I checked across our portfolio of Series A, B, and C companies. There's 147 job openings at those companies, so if you're looking for a job or a career, there's those, plus we have a lot more seed-funded companies if you want to take a little bit more early-stage risk.
And I'm sure all the jobs are on WHub as well. So about, we'll start with what is not working in FinTech. And actually, as entrepreneurs in FinTech, you are actually solving one of the problems. So maybe we can start with this. What problem? Because every problem is actually an opportunity. So what problem has you identified and what are you solving? So Alex.
So, of course, the 3 of us, we would answer based on our businesses. And our business is really to deploy liquidity. So when you have trapped liquidity on your balance sheet, you have assets, we are helping you to unlock them, to create value. Now, if I tell you about 5 to 10 years, actually, it's to democratize finance. But if I talk to you about democratizing finance, where we position ourselves as capital trading, you will say, bullshit. And so I'm not going to talk about democratizing, but imagine you have $100 and you want to buy a fraction of a Picasso. That is where we're going. But we can't go today because of regulation, and therefore we talk to professional investors, license 1, 9, and so forth, and we help them unlock value. 2 seconds.
Perfect. David, if you can do more than 2 seconds.
So for us, it's a very basic problem, but a very fundamental one that we solve. It's the inability for young businesses, particularly here in Hong Kong, to open a bank account. It sounds simple, but the reality is, and I don't know if you've experienced it yourself, it's a harsh one. Hong Kong is a super attractive, place to come and set up your business from a global point of view. It's low taxes. You don't need to have a resident director here. It's a super strong legal environment. So you want to be having a trading company, especially so if you're buying products from China or if you're selling into China. So that is the easy part. Once you've opened your company, and by the way, there are over 6,000 service providers that will help you open the company, the next main big point is, can you get a bank account for that company? And the answer is probably not. And that's what we solve as a pain point. So it's, again, a very simple thing, but it's very powerful because from there you can build a lot on it.
Thank you. Tytus, some of concrete examples.
Sure, so maybe what I'll talk about is a specific company that we recently invested in, based in Hong Kong. And again, for them, they're solving a specific problem that after you sign up with Neat at David, then the next question that a lot of companies will have is, how do I get access to working capital financing? Because if an SME, certainly a startup, if you go to your local bank and you say, please, can I get a working capital loan? They will politely or not politely escort you out the door. So working capital financing is not just a problem in Hong Kong, it's a global problem. And this company that we invested in is called REAP, R-E-A-P. You can obviously go to their website, .hk. And what they do is they allow you to use existing credit cards, so your personal card, business cards, and you get a fixed fee for 2 months. So it's really a way to take advantage of the existing credit infrastructure to make it easier to access working capital loans. And in terms of the business model, a company in the US called Plastic has proven out this business model. They've raised over 70 million US, obviously process a lot more in terms of loans. So we're really excited about what REAP is doing to enable small businesses to access credit and access financing in Hong Kong and regionally. And of course, they're also hiring. So if you're looking for joining an early stage startup, again, as an engineer, they're looking specifically for engineering talent. Please take a look or let me know afterwards.
So congratulations on the big news. We love to hear about Hong Kong companies being able to raise this funding. So thank you very much. So I think one of the biggest announcements that we had in FinTech over the past year has been virtual banking. As you know, the cost of rent here in Hong Kong is tremendous, and should be one of the solutions, I would say. We are still waiting for the big announcement of who is going to be in the first batch. So this morning we had WHub and TNG on the panel. We're like 2 applicants of it. But is it really one of the solutions? And David, I would really like to hear your perspective on virtual banking.
Sure. So I'm controversial on this topic, right? Because
I
have been for a while. For full disclosure, actually, we started the process. We actually went in and applied. And then very quickly we realized that the cost infrastructure that is involved in having a Hong Kong version of a virtual banking license, which really boils down to 3 main building blocks. One is a 300 million Hong Kong dollar minimum, emphasis on the minimum capital requirement. Second, an extremely strong corporate governance, which means that, to put it simply, you're going to need the former CEO of another bank to be on your board, most likely as a chairman. Not that easy to find. And third, last but not least, an even more stringent security around your technology as a virtual bank versus a traditional bank. So if you start adding up, and then there's like many other details, but if you start adding up the cost side of that equation, then you realize that the initial intent from the HKMA to basically facilitate financial inclusion is gone. Right? Financial inclusion is what we do every single day. And let me tell you, if you were to have the cost infrastructure that a virtual banking license in Hong Kong rightly or wrongly requires, we would not be able to serve that customer base. So that's why we're controversial, because we're saying this is great in terms of allowing new players to come in. By the way, I don't think it's a secret anymore, but it's only going to be huge brands, right? So much for giving a chance to challengers to really come along, like for example in the UK or in the European Union. Now you're going to start seeing this in the US as well. Hong Kong is not going down that path, so again, we're controversial in that sense. But above all, where's the real result in terms of, or where is the real result going to be in terms of financial inclusion? Because that's ultimately the real value added of having a digital solution. Because let's face it, starting with Hong Kong, most people here have at least one bank account, right? Businesses that are established will have bank accounts. New businesses are a challenge, but then if you have too high a cost of infrastructure, you're not going to be able to serve them.
And I do have a neat account as well, and that is very useful.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, David. Tytus, what I love about Fresco is that actually, you're not focused on one vertical, but you actually see startups and businesses as a whole and as it fit together. So as this panel is more about FinTech, maybe you can also tell us from your experience, how maybe investing in other type of company led you to invest into FinTech solutions that you felt were really needed for the companies that you already had in your portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. And REAP certainly was one of those companies where we saw that access to credit by startups, certainly a pain point. Another area that we're very active in is EdTech broadly. And so financing around education, we feel, is again another area of huge opportunity. We have a company called Empower Financing that just closed a $100 million investment. They provide loans for international students studying overseas. So basically, if you go to an overseas university, you are not in that domestic credit system, so you will not get access to those domestic loans. And so international students are unfairly penalized by existing credit systems. So our experience is that as a cross-border investor, understandably, there's this regulatory backlash around lots of issues. One of the unintended consequences of the regulatory backlash is that cross-border financing and cross-border transactions have actually become harder across finance. And so we are actively looking for companies like Empower that are saying, if you use a data-driven approach, you can solve these cross-border financing issues, provide access to credit, provide more inclusive finance, and yet still stay very compliant with regulations. Not easy, but it's a big opportunity.
Yeah, so regulation. So, are regulators enabling innovation? That's, one of the big questions, and I can see your smile here. Maybe Alex, if you do need some water.
No, I've lived too long in Hong Kong.
So, you're more into blockchain, and actually there has been some announcement from the SFC, end of last year. So maybe you can tell us what you think about it.
Yes, so first of all, we need regulation because it's a level playing field. Otherwise, it's the Far West, and there's a lot of nonsense, right? So we have to be best in class, especially when you accept client money. I mean, my friend here is B2C. There's a client, there's a human that has a life. So if it goes bust, and I hope, and you will never, because it's a strong community, but that affects somebody. So that's number one. But let me step back. I think we mix innovation and innovation and regulation cannot go together. It's impossible, because innovation is about I don't know, regulation is about I know. So it's two opposite paradigms, yeah? Two different. So what the regulators are doing, they say, I don't know anything about blockchain, about AI, let me put together a sandbox, and I will get people into my sandbox and I will learn from them. So if it's a learning exercise and the outcome, it's clear that it's about learning, fine. I think the regulation cannot be done by the regulator only, but by all of us. So we need to impact at the FinTech Association, so we're on the board together, and you're a member. We try to influence, and influence means not just for me, but for the community, for everybody, and that's very important. So my message, we need regulation, but we need to participate in identifying where we need it, and then we need to influence it.
So, David, what about you? You're regulated for some parts, and can you tell us more with your interaction with the regulators as well?
Sure, I think the regulators' interaction have changed dramatically over our existence so far. So we started off just over 3 years ago when there was no FinTech facilitation office, right? So we're in FinTech, and the main regulator for us is the HKMA, was really alien, and we were alien to them, right, in that sense. And some of the team members who are here will remember that we had some really scary phone calls by the HKMA in the early days because they had no idea basically how social media worked, right? So they would kept on referring that on our website, somebody, we were using the word banking, but actually it was somebody on Twitter that said, oh, neat, in Hong Kong, very cool, #banking, right? So you're not allowed to use the word banking, right, according to the banking ordinance here, but you cannot control social media, and they would not understand that. Now, credit to the regulator, they actually upped their game substantially. They went and hired, best-in-class people from the private sector, from investment banks, and staffed what is now the FinTech Facilitation Office. That was a complete sea change in terms of interaction, understanding, engagement, and help, to be very frank. So that's improved enormously. Our engagement at a higher level when we went in for a virtual banking license, it was very clear. So they were transparent enough, so that's a good thing. It was very clear that it was not for us, right? It was just too much. Not for us, and more importantly, not for our customers. So I actually welcome the fact that today, if you are serious and you have a value proposition, the regulator, I can speak from the HKMA point of view, will entertain a discussion. They will be very professional, very efficient. And when there's problems, by the way, they'll step in, which is really admirable, actually, because they are the ultimate referee in the market. As Alex was saying before, it creates a level playing field.
And actually, you can appreciate having a frank answer, because it's always better than no answer at all. Tytus, you have also a lot of startups that are, pushing the limits a little bit in terms of regulation, trying to make things move forward. And you must see a lot of, kind of new businesses where you don't really know where the regulation is going to stand from, and what is your approach to it, because it's really adding an extra risk which might be another opportunity, but still as a VC, you need to take it into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just to tie it back to the last set of comments, I think panels can be boring if everyone agrees all the time. So I will respectfully disagree around innovation and regulation not being able to coexist. I think regulators can innovate and should innovate. And the example I would use is Estonia and e-residency. I think it's a fantastic program. I think they're really pioneers there. And my advice to regulators in Hong Kong or Singapore would be take a look at what they're doing, because it sounds gimmicky, but there's an underlying really strong FinTech angle to it. And I think whoever figures it out in Asia will really get that first step forward. So I would encourage regulators to innovate. I know it sounds challenging, but I think whoever figures it out will be in a really strong position. So back to the point around how we think about regulation, absolutely we see it both as an opportunity and a risk. I guess because I've been around the block a little bit and have seen a few cycles. We prefer to play by the rules, and so we tend to be those investors that will say, especially in Asia, that if the rules aren't clear or if we know where the rules are, let's not cross those lines. And I think especially in China, there's a lot of investors that say, oh, no, don't worry, those are the rules, but we do it all the time. And first of all, we say, no thanks, we can't do that. And secondly, the reality is, for every 10 people that do that, there's another 2 people that obviously, it didn't work out for them. So maybe that makes us a little bit boring as a VC investor, but both for myself and my family and also for our investors, I think having that peace of mind, knowing that, we're taking things seriously. And then also from just a social impact perspective, when we look at it, we say, the backlash against startups that have been breaking the rules, whether it's Facebook on social media, whether it's Uber, we really do believe that fundamentally the attitude of move fast and break things, that philosophy has to shift, and startups have to be mindful of the social context they operate in.
Yeah, definitely they do, but also they need to push the line just a little bit to make things go further. So we've been talking a lot about, what's wrong actually here in FinTech. So, let's use what's left of the panel to go into what's right in FinTech. So Alex, can you give us one example of something that has been going in the past, 1 year, 18 months in FinTech, in Hong Kong? Oh my God, you look so scared.
No, I haven't prepared, so I don't know. No, I think us, the community, so I will always step back because it's bloody hard to be a FinTech startup in Hong Kong. It's one of the hardest places because of, and I'm not pointing at you, but funding is really, really hard. Particularly there's a gap between $1.5 to $5. When we have a Series A, $5 to $10, I'll call a few friends and I can close the round in a couple of months. Right? Why? Because we have traction. So the risk is lower. And we nearly died 3 times in 28 months. This is real. We had 0 money left. And what I did, I called friends and I said, I have skin in the game. I put X. I'm asking you to put whatever. And they matched me. And we survived. So that, I think, but going back to what goes right, because it felt wrong a little bit. What goes right is that we have a very, very, very strong community where we help each other. So we could be frenemy. So let's say I start a bank and David has a bank. We won't compete. We might compete on the business, but we will be friendly and refer people to each other. That's what we do here.
Okay, picking up on the ecosystem, absolutely. I think there's many dimensions of the ecosystem, right? Anywhere from co-working spaces, that's not necessarily for FinTech, for entrepreneurship in general, which I think, frankly, you need to look at FinTech in a much broader sense, right? Because it's all very well to talk about the nitty-gritty of what exactly you're doing between financial and technology spaces, but then you need to build a business, right? And to build a business, you need to have very talented people. So where do you actually house them? This is a major pain point that we have ourselves, right? We've grown. We were 6 people 1 year ago. We're now 33. By the end of this year, we'll be around 100, right? So where do we put people in an office space in Hong Kong, which is the most expensive place on the planet for, corporate rentals, right? So it's very, very challenging. And so what's working well is that you have a community that's developed, whether it's, again, part-time, easy to use, hot desking, and you have then a community that's developed also in terms of talent. So a lot of the universities, all the universities pretty much now are super interested in FinTech. One of them wrote a case study about us as a business school. It was fantastic, very involved. What that does is that ultimately it influences the parents of the students. And that is a pain point I think we've all experienced. I mean, I can count at least 3 very clear situations where in the early stages we had very talented young candidates who came in, put an offer on the table, looked at the candidate straight in the face and said, "You sure your parents are going to allow you to do this?" "Yes, it's my life." Sure enough, 3 times they got turned down. Why? Because the parents didn't want to do it. So this ecosystem, this vortex that's really starting to happen, and I can personally feel it. I mean, Tytus has been in the ecosystem even longer than I have. He's older. But it's true that in the early days, you didn't have events like this. So it's happening. That's what we're saying. And it's really, first of all, very pleasing to see. And it does have a major impact on FinTech as well as the other sectors of entrepreneurship. And really that's what's been working very well and it's changing here.
Tytus, it's hard to add on all this, but...
Let me add for a twist. So, since I got called out for being the old man on stage, which is fine, I'll wear that handle. Back in the early days, a close friend of mine started a FinTech company called 8 Securities. Unfortunately, we didn't invest. They could raise much more money than we have. So I was catching up with him yesterday, and so I have some red packets from him for people. And so 8 Securities is an online brokerage. In these red packets are share certificates. So if you sign up with the red packet, you get a free share. So I'm going to leave these on my chair, especially for students and young people. If you have a brokerage account, please do not take these. These are for young people that are just starting out and want to learn how to save. So I'm going to do that. And that's an example of, I'm not an investor in the company. I love the company. I want to support it. That said, in terms of big trends, what's working, I'm going to call out the obvious one, which is consumer FinTech in China clearly is leading the world. So sadly, Hong Kong isn't likely to necessarily be that big there. I think the opportunity for Hong Kong is B2B. Exactly what we've seen here. We're really excited about the opportunity for Hong Kong to be a global B2B hub, and I think that to me is playing to the strengths of Hong Kong. And on the consumer side, at least connecting to China, I think that's the opportunity there. Although clearly it's more mature in China. So those are the things that we're excited about in terms of the business side. In addition, totally echo the community aspect.
Thank you very much, Tytus. That's really great, and we'll make sure to thank Michal also about it. So you can find him and learn more about this really great opportunity. There is also one last question, basically, that I would like to ask all of you, which is as entrepreneurs, in your own fields with your own experience, we know how hard it is. We know that things keep moving and changing. But what keeps you doing it? And what's your driver? What's your passion?
You have to be full of ego and really humble when you are an entrepreneur. Full of ego because you have a mission, a vision that nobody can change. You can call it North or whatever you want to call it. And this is 24/7. You're always on. The thing is that it impacts everybody around you, your wife, your husband, your children. So you have to be selfish a little bit. At the same time, you have to be humble because you do not know where it's going, right? And with my friends here, all of us, we are really, really intense kind of people, right? So you have a coffee with us, you get a download of everything, and we are not for everybody because we are on. So we might be talking to you, but actually we're thinking about 2 or 3 things, and everything that we do is about revenue. It's about, moving and not dying. This year I have 2 things to do, is free cash flow by the end of the year and Series A. And these 2 things are impossible in itself. But if they are not impossible, I go back to Deutsche Bank or whatever where I was, and then I go grey and bitter. But it's all about passion.
Wow.
Sorry.
Look,
but don't become entrepreneurs.
I think there's something to be said about the grass being always greener, right? To be fair, I spent 16 years in a large corporation, moved to being my own boss. There's no right or wrong, very frankly, right? It is there's challenges on both fronts. However, would I want to go back to corporate? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to change it. Why? Because if we're all honest to ourselves, there's sometimes that are really difficult. And I mean really difficult, especially in places like Hong Kong, which is a big boys, excuse me ladies, but a big boys place, right? Or big ladies place. It's a brand place, right? Here, if you have a brand that hopefully is imported from the US, or North America, Europe, people will lap it up. They'll bring you to the stock market, they'll IPO you. Perfect place to be. When you're trying to build a brand from scratch, it is one of the hardest places, right? Because people are extremely conservative, and so you feel very lonely in that sense, right? So it's extremely important to be surrounded by a top team, and I'm extremely proud of our team, I can tell you. And of course, we're hiring too. So if you are interested, apply within. But above all, what I think is the big difference is that you don't have in the entrepreneurial world, in FinTech or otherwise, you don't have these moments of lull that you get very frustrated because there's nothing happening. It's so stressful that you feel so alive, and that's what keeps me going, to be very frank, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So for us, our big mission, and it's big, we phrase it as building global ecosystems. So how drilling that down, what does that actually mean, and why as a VC fund, we believe that as a VC fund, investing in founders is a high leverage way to really create change in society. And I think what we've seen in the last 2 years is that the old system is fundamentally broken. What we don't want to do is go back in time to just a bunch of tribes. And so we really believe in this idea that the entire global system and social structure needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, and working through entrepreneurs and as investors supporting those entrepreneurs, that's the best way we can achieve that.
Thank you very much. I want you all to join me and to give a big round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much.